Hi VC, how you doing? This is Vince. I'm doing my second video right now, and I decided to go back and do a little history since I started so young doing this, and my father was actually the original influence for me getting into collecting stuff. That I wanted to start initially about him, and then get into some of the early records I bought when I was little, and different things that happened, basically covering up through my young up to early teens maybe, just to give you an idea where I'm coming from and some of the stuff that I was into. And I pretty much like just about everything I did when I was little, so it's just kind of compounded on as time went on. Each thing I just kind of added on, and more things that I end up liking, it just adds on. So I want to start with, initially, my father was he was a jazz singer when he was younger. Late teens, early 20s. He was in a group and recorded a bunch of stuff, then played in LA and New York and Florida, and recorded a bunch of stuff in Rochester, where I'm from. He never actually pressed any records, but he did have some acetates, which are the lacquer covered metal discs that they use for pressing, so you can actually play them. And I actually have two of the ones that he made. Just to show you, let me take the cover off because there's a glare. This is one of them. Now you can see I actually am the one who drew all this stuff when I was a kid. I have no idea when I did it, but I did write this. But this is the label that was put on there, and there's the record label, fine, and that was his stage name, Joey Vincent. And these are both 10-inch records, and you can see there's with the way the discs look, and on the back of this one there's nothing. And you see the holes for when they put it on the press, they fit in the slots so that it stays steady. So like I said, these are actually the discs that were used, they're just coated so you can actually play them. So that's one. Now this one is another one. This one's actually two-sided. This one's messed up, so I can't really play it. It makes like a shing sound. It's got some kind of, I think the lacquer started coming up, so it's got like this white coating. It's like really rough. But this one's actually two-sided, and you can see the label on this one. This actually has the songs listed on it. And here's the flip side. So it's kind of cool that I've actually got records of my dad, even though they're not records, but I actually have two of them. So initially my dad was the singer, like I said. And the story is when he was in his early 20s, he actually got offered a record deal by ABC Paramount Records. Now this was the early 60s, so you're talking about the time of Frankie Avalon and Fabian and, you know, the teen type singers, and he was straight jazz and nothing else at that point in his life. And he got offered a deal, but that's what they wanted him to do, and he said, "No way, I'm not doing it. I'm not selling out." And he quit music, which sucks. But at least I got a story. And right after that, he actually started a business with another guy, and did that up through the early 80s. Anyway, so that's those. Now these are some of the albums that he had, records that he had, that I purchased myself because I liked them as well, just to give you an idea of some of the stuff he had. Like I said, it was pretty much jazz, but he had probably about 300 albums. And he actually, the stereo in our house was actually built into the house. He actually had the cutting turntable that he took out of the actual unit where the cutting turntable was, took all the parts except for the tone arm, which he put a different arm in, and put it into another wooden case and put it all together and screwed it together. So it turned into a regular turntable. It had a really heavy-duty platter on it and really big cover on it. But, I mean, the entire thing was built into the house, so when we sold the house, the people who bought the house had to get the stereo with it. Anyway, I'm going to start with this because it's the only 45 that I have. He'd had about maybe 25, 45, so he didn't have that many. but there was a few that stuck out. And this particular one I actually found. It's actually Count Basie, and it's his version of "Hallelujah, I Love Her So," Ray Charles tune, and it's sung by Joe Williams, who was one of the singers that used to do records with him. And I really like this version. It's really a really cool jazz version. And so that's that. Now, these are all albums. These are all ones that he had and albums that I really liked. So when I found copies, I decided to buy them. Herbie Mann, Our Man Flute. This actually came out the year I was born, which is 1966. But I remember this one partially because of the cover and partially because of some of the versions on here. There's actually a kind of cool poppy jazz version of Good Lovin' on here. So there was this one. Now, my dad in the 80s actually did take me to see Herbie Mann, and he took me to see Tony Bennett, and he took me to see this person actually in a club in Rochester in the 80s. So he died in the early 90s, so he wasn't around too much longer after I saw it. But in the early 80s, I saw Buddy Rich in a club with a small, like a 8-10 piece band. That's pretty wild. Anyway, this was one of the Buddy Rich albums that he did have, and this is a really good album. I don't know how many. For anybody who's into Buddy Rich, this is actually a gatefold, and then the cover actually opens up like that. Actually, looks like a giant pill, but you know. Anyway, so this was another one that I remember really liking, so I found a copy of that. As far as singers went, this is one of the male singers he really liked. This is Mel Torme. Now, he had a lot of older ones that are hard to find. This was actually one that I remember him buying, because this came out in 75, so I was 10. I actually remember him buying this one. But this one's pretty good. It's a live one. Not much in the back. One of the female singers he really liked was Nancy Wilson. He had a lot of Nancy Wilson albums. I like her. A lot of her records are real poppy. This particular one I remember because Cannonball Adderley plays half the record. He does the music on the other half with Nancy, but he also does instrumental tracks. I really like this one, so I found a copy of this. That was cool. Now, this one, ironically enough, this was the first singer that ever struck me at all. I remember him playing this record, and then hearing him sing, going, holy crap, this guy is speaking to me somehow. So he became my first favorite singer. So when I was a little kid, when whatever little kids were liking in the mid-70s, my favorite person was Tom Jones. So, believe it or not, I got picked on a little bit. But I really like this album. It's a live album, and there's some good versions of stuff on here. Especially the upbeat stuff. There's a great version of Shake, and obviously it's not unusual on here, but he does Land of a Thousand Dances. And the first opening cut is the short one, is called Good News. I don't remember who wrote it, but it's a really good soul tune. It actually says it's written by Sam Cooke. I've never heard Sam Cooke's version of it, but it's a really good song in it. So there's that. Now, the last three I'm going to show are actually a vocal group that he really liked that stuck with me because some of the vocalists that he did listen to, that he had albums by, were kind of cheesy. A lot of the jazz vocalists back then were really more like pop singers. And I do like some of the ones that he did like I showed you Mel Torme. I like Tony Bennett. I have a couple Tony Bennett albums, but not ones that he actually had. But this vocal group was like the coolest first jazz vocal group that I know of. Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. This was their first album. I just found this recently, actually, on eBay. It's an original copy of this. Am I record skipping, really? You gotta be kidding. Hold on a second. I hate when that happens. This is an album where they do Duke Ellington songs. Here's the back. And this is the one that I remember the most. This was their first Columbia one. And it's got Twisted and Cloudburst on it, and my favorite song by them, which is Gimme That Wine, which is a pretty funny song. It's basically about saying that, you know, they give the guy options they give him something and he picks wine over it every time. It's if you should find it, if you don't know it, look for it on YouTube. It's a pretty funny song. I actually have a version of this by Blood, Sweat and Tears, which is interesting. But so there's this one. So that's a bunch of my dad's stuff, just to give you an idea what he was listening to, and then his records. So anyway, so every night after work, he would come home. Once he started his business, he would come home and just play records until I went to bed, and probably way past that, because I went to bed earlier, obviously, because I was a kid. So from that early on, and seeing that every night, both my brother and I just grabbed right into collecting records. Now, I started when I was 5. So obviously I didn't have much money. But there was a department store, I think it was called Murphy's. And they used to have either cutout records or records that had fallen off the charts that were kind of old. They put a baggie on them and sell them for $0.25. So to me that was great, you know. I can throw together a couple quarters and buy some records. So these are some of the ones that I actually bought when I was 5 or 6 for $0.25. I actually have original versions of some of these, and they're pretty beat, but it's pretty cool that I actually have these. This is actually the Bee Gees. Now, this is early 70s Bee Gees, so it's not disco, obviously. But this song, it's called On Time, is actually written by Maurice. This is actually a rock tune. And it doesn't sound like the Bee Gees at all. It's a really good song. So, that one. I mentioned Blood, Sweat, and Tears. This was actually the first single they released once David Clayton Thomas left, when they had a different singer. I remember buying this as a quarter. This is actually a really cool tune. This could have been a hit. I don't know why it wasn't. This one, more of a folky kind of pop song, maybe like early America. This is actually a group called The Marmalade. Now, they had one real big hit called Reflections of My Life in like 70. Well, this was a single that came out, I think, after it. Only get to, I think, 50. But this is called Rainbow and The Ballad of Cherry Flavor. Both these songs are almost the same. But they're good for what they are. Now here's the coolest thing I think I bought for $0.25. And I actually had, at the same time, bought the single for Won't Get Fooled Again. This is Summertime Blues by The Who. This was my copy. I actually rebought this and have a better one in there, but I wanted to show you my original one that I bought when I was 5. And on the flip is Heaven and Hell, which is like probably my favorite Who song. It's actually an Entwistle tune that was on Entwistle's first solo album. His version is okay, it's more slow. This is like a full-out straight rock. And this, at the time, wasn't unreleased. So there's that. Now I also have, which I don't have anymore, is I bought Mississippi Queen for $0.25. Obviously not long after it came out. I remember my copy was like crooked, so it did the thing. It was pretty funny. Another one that was actually a hit that I bought for $0.25 after, fell off the charts was Dancing in the Moonlight by King Harvest. And you got to understand, when I was 5 or 6, I didn't get the music part. So I would actually buy singles when they had cool labels, because I didn't know who most of these people were. So I got a lot of records with cool labels that weren't very good, because I liked the label. Now that label's cool. That one I got lucky with. Anyway, here's another cool label that I got lucky with, because I actually like this group. This is Rare Earth. Now this song's called Good Time Sally. This is as good as their biggest hit, which is I Just Want to Celebrate. But this came out in 72 after they were going backwards. So I've got this, and the flip side's actually cool because it's not on an album, so I had to keep it anyway, even though I have the album that this song's on. The other cool thing about this, the time on here says, say it in, 2:65. Really? Somebody doesn't know how to tell time who was pressing those labels. Well, that's a bunch of the ones that I bought for $0.25. Now this one In 73, my parents went to Paris. So 73, I was 7. I didn't want toys or anything. I wanted a record when they came back. So they got me a record in Paris. This is a group called Triangle. They're kind of like a slightly proggy jazz rock group. There was a picture sleeve with this that's long gone, but this is the original single. Really like both of these songs. Had this forever. Never was able to find a record. I've seen CD reissues of... Now this wasn't on one of their albums, but I've seen a CD reissue that had it on there. I found their second album at a Goodwill, sealed. It was probably the coolest thing I ever found, for $1. And it doesn't have the song on there, but I sent it to my brother. My brother does transferring of analog recordings onto digital and makes professional CDs and booklets and all that stuff. He took my second album, transferred, because it's really clean, transferred it onto CD, and threw a clean version of these two songs at the end. Printed the cover out and everything. He found a copy of this single somewhere for like $10 or something. So he had the sleeve. He printed the sleeve on the corner of the cover, so I had a copy of it. So it's kind of cool. So anyway, I got this. It was my first record from a trip that I ever got. Now these I'm pulling because this was in kindergarten. The one thing I remember about kindergarten, they had a record player on the counter and a stack of 45s. So what would happen is on our break time or whatever, kids would get in line. They'd pick whatever record they wanted to hear. They wait, and they take their turn, they play the record, then get back to the end of the line, whatever. These were actually two of the songs that I used to pick all the time. This was my favorite one to pick. This is an old soul tune called Somebody's Been Sleepin'. Apparently Foghat did a version of this in 79 as well, but it's a really cool funk tune. But I always picked this one. This was like my favorite in the stack of what have you. I remember one time somebody took this on me, and so I couldn't play it. This was my second favorite. This is Treat Her Like a Lady by Cornelius Brother and Sister Rose, another soul tune. So I actually liked soul tunes back then, but they were both hits, so I knew the songs anyway. So this obviously isn't the original version, but anyway, so that's those two. So as time went on, let me stop it. As we got to the middle 70s, as far as singles now, there was a guy at my father's work who was really good friends with the Columbia salesperson. So this Columbia salesperson would just dump all these promos on him. And so what he would do is he'd take all the singles that he got, and he'd bring them to my father's work and pass them out and give them out to all the people. And my dad would always grab a bunch, bring them home with him. So my brother and I we'd take the ones that we liked and what have you. So we're talking 75, 76, I got into some groups that I wouldn't normally have, even up till I think 78, because this one's actually from 78. First one I'm going to show. This is actually Elvis Costello. This year's model. This is the one I actually got. This is the original version. The cool thing about this one, the flip side, Big Tears, is not on the album. So that's really cool. Here's an oddball one that I just ended up liking, because it's actually on a country label. It's called Same Old Story by Jack Kelly and Company. It's basically kind of like a light country tune, but then it breaks into a rock part in between, like after each of the choruses. So I like that, so I ended up keeping this one. It's the only version I've ever seen of this. Nick Lowe. First time I ever heard Nick Lowe. Single for So It Goes. Didn't chart, but really good song. Flip side is a live version of a song that's on there, but only the studio version, and this live version is killer. So I've got this. See, it's got the promo print on the top. Roger McGuinn, solo from the third solo album, Born on the Bayou. So that's the first time I got to actually hear him by himself. And this is a good tune too as well. Now, this is another one of those oddballs like that one, except these are actually really good tunes, and I kept this because I've never seen this before anywhere. And they never made an album. They're called Blaze. This is the catchiest tune on the planet and should have been a hit, but wasn't. It's called Silver Heels. And the flip side's a really good rock tune. Like I said, I don't know anything about them. They're on Sweet City, which Wild Cherry was on, and a couple other people. So I'm thinking they're probably from Cleveland or Pennsylvania or somewhere around there. And I do remember seeing, I think, a promo single of another song on eBay that someday I'd like to get if I can. But that's all I've ever seen by the group. This one is a group called American Tears. I have the 3 albums that they put out initially. This single actually came in between 2 albums, so it was never released on an album, so I'm glad I kept this. But this is a good rock tune as well. Now, Mark Mangold was the main guy in this. He did a lot of writing and stuff like that in the 80s for other people, and he's probably more well-known for that, if anybody knows who he is. But, so this is a good tune as well. Now, this last one was actually a little sampler. It's called the Now Wave. This came out in '79. It's got 4 different groups on it, none of which made it. Cinceros, the Hounds, Jules and the Polar Bears. Jules Shear went solo and did a bunch of stuff, but he never made it or anything. And then the Beat, which eventually was called, I think, the Beat UK or something, because there was the English Beat, and they didn't want to get him confused. All pretty decent, kind of punky-ish or new wave-ish kind of bands. Not too far one way or the other. There's a version by the Hounds of Do Wah Diddy Diddy that I really like. It's probably the best version of that song I've ever heard. Well, anyway, so I had this. So I got to know all these bands, which never would have made it, and I never would have heard of before. And I've actually got 3 out of 4 of these albums. That's the only one I don't have. So anyway, like I said, I got into a bunch of stuff from that, and also we ended up getting to go to his house one time, my brother and I with my dad, and got to see his room with all his albums in it. He had 4 walls of shelves like that, filled with records that he basically got for nothing. Every kind of music on the planet, all CBS, Epic, and whatever offshoots of that. He gave us about 15 or 20 albums of rock stuff. We just asked for, what are you into? He said, oh, rock. So he just gave us a whole bunch of, I'll show those later. Anyway, lastly for this one, I'm going to show you some other 45s that I bought when I was younger. When they came out, these weren't quarter ones actually. These were songs that I actually liked and I remember buying. Star Baby by the Guess Who. Guess Who was one of my first 2 favorite bands along with Grand Funk. So I got a lot of their singles and albums when I was early, in my early ages. This is one single that I bought when it came out because I remember really liking that song. Sweet, Fox on the Run. First single I bought by them. I actually got into Sweet through my cousin who had the Desolation Boulevard album. I remember him playing it and hearing the song Sweet F.A. If you know Sweet, you'll know what I'm talking about. And just my jaw dropped when I heard that song. And then this became a hit, and I grabbed right on this. The Flip Side, which isn't on an American album, even better song, Burn on the Flame. This was my first Beatles record. I bought this when it came out. Would have been nice to buy a Beatles record when they were around, but I was 4 when they broke up. Can't do anything about that. Got to Get You Into My Life. This is my original copy, as you can see. And then I think Helter Skelter's on the flip side, so I just have this for posterity's sake. I've got these on records, obviously. One of the many hits that I really liked, Cliff Richard, Devil Woman. Good rock song for him. Another unreleased tune on the flip side, so I kept this. The Babies, first Babies record I ever got, Isn't It Time, which was their first hit, and then actually like the song better, Give Me Your Love. It's more of a rock tune. So I bought that when it came out. Another sweet tune, Love Is Like Oxygen. Obviously like that song too. Another unreleased tune on the other side, more of a rock tune, Cover Girl, really good song. And then lastly, original Police fan from the beginning, Roxanne. Bought that when it came out. Flip, Dead End Job. Cool song. Not on an album. Now these are kind of oddballs. Now when I was in junior high, I was going to join the radio club. I never ended up doing it, but I remember there being a box of 45s in the room, and he let us go through them. This was one of the ones I found. This is really rare, and apparently this band only put out like one album somewhere, and this single isn't even from it. It's actually a Canadian copy, but this is like kind of country rock. But this one side, Rockin' in the City, is a good song. Now this one's kind of cool because this band actually played at my junior high. They're called Free Fare. For what I've taken, they've had lots of members over the years, and then they kept going with the same name. So I doubt anybody in this version of the band was playing when I went to junior high, because this is more from 75-ish. But this is a cool funk rock song. Kind of like, the Wild Cherry tune, except not as overproduced. But really good funk rock tune. Flip side's horrible. I don't know who's singing, but he shouldn't be. Last one I'm going to show, this is pretty funny. My brother actually owned this first, but I got a copy of this, and being that at that point I was totally anti-disco, not as much anymore, I don't really like it, but I mean, I was really anti-disco at that point. My brother was also, he's a little younger than me. Do You Think I'm Disco? Steve Dahl, and Steve Dahl's the guy that did the thing at the Chicago White Sox Stadium, where he blew up all the disco records. This is pretty funny. And then there's an anti-disco blues tune on the flip side. Anyway, I've talked way too far, way too long. That's a lot of my youth. I've got a bunch of albums to show that have to do with my youth. That was playing in the background, just so you know, was from one of the first albums I ever got for Christmas in '72. My second Guess Who album, because actually I had the Best of the Guess Who first, So Long Been a Time. The most popular song in here was called Rain Dance. So if anybody knows a song on here, that's what they know. It's Rain Dance. So I will sign off, and I'll try this again next time I get a chance. Take care. See ya.